And we're live. Hello. Good evening, guys. Welcome to the Thursday night edition of Pontificating with Pete on Generational Change. Hope you're all doing well. Wonder if you all were able to catch Jen's interview from a little while ago with Reza Aslan. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you check it out. That is on the Jen Perlman for Congress page. Jen for FL25 is a YouTube channel as well. So make sure you check that out and get yourself acquainted. We're going to have a lively discussion tonight. I believe, I'm going to say his name right, but I think that these conversations right now are very, very important. Rabbi David Mivasair. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. But I've been following his work for a little while. And I do think it's very important to hear from people that are putting themselves out there and risking a lot socially, economically, and so on. And it takes a lot of courage to say what needs to be said in lieu of a genocide when it's being perpetrated by people that are used to being able to get away with murder, no pun intended. And so in addition to that, we are also going to address Briahna Joy Gray, who was fired from the Hill earlier this evening. I have quite a bit to say on that. I don't have anything against Briahna. She has a career. She's doing what she's going to do. But there's no question that when you fly a little too close to the sun, there's a lot of things that could happen in terms of one's career if you're willing to speak out on an issue. First, it'll be a warning. Then it'll just be conversation that becomes a little bit more pointed until eventually it becomes this, well, now you got to go. And the truth is, speaking truth to power these days, it comes at a price. There's a lot of things that are at risk here, that a lot of people are not willing to talk about. And the reason that I'm willing to talk about it is because they do not want to put themselves in a financial circumstance that is difficult to get out of if things don't go well. So whether it was conscientious or not on the part of, let's say, Tucker Carlson, when he started talking about more of an anti-war streak, especially in lieu of what's going on between Russia and Ukraine, and obviously what's going on between Israel, Palestine. Palestine does exist. You should go and check out some of the commentary on some of Jen's posts. You'd be amazed. The Zionists do not consider Palestine. It's not a thing. But if there is a person who does consider Palestine a thing, and it is important that members of the Jewish community, and especially ones that should be respected. And what I mean by that is, it's what, it shouldn't be this way. I mean, everyone's opinion should matter. But when people that give their lives to their faith and are willing to teach it, and that is a very big sacrifice for many people of all different walks of life, when they're willing to speak out against their own in lieu of this idea that one can quantify what a faith really is, or that it should be, there should be no separation. We see this in a lot of different Christian denominations, that there is these different belief systems that one has. But, the thing that we've realized in this moment is that Judaism is being captured, if you will, by the Zionist movement, or at least is attempting to. But there has been a considerable amount of pushback, whether it is by Jen, who is a former Zionist running for Congress against somebody who is as full-blown Zionist as it can possibly be. So the distinction's pretty clear. But I thought that this conversation was important to have, especially in lieu of what's going on right now in Rafah, especially in lieu of what's going on with the attacks on journalists. If anybody can speak truth to power on that, it is somebody who is a member of the hierarchy, if you will, in the Jewish faith. And that, of course, is Rabbi David Mivasair. If I say it right, did I get it? I got it. Rabbi, welcome to Pontificating with Pete on Generational Change.
Thank you. That's great.
And thank you for what you do, first and foremost. As I say, anybody who is willing to make that sacrifice for their faith, it does take a lot. And obviously, your voice has been very powerful and very strong in this moment. How long have you personally been speaking out against the Zionist movement, especially in their attempts to kind of blend this idea that Zionism and Judaism are interchangeable, are not interchangeable. And so, how long has that fight been going on for you personally?
I'm going to make that a little more nuanced than the
Sure.
way you asked it. And I've been involved with this and trying to bring about positive change around Israel and around Zionism for more than 50 years.
Wow.
The way you frame the question is, how long have I been like speaking out against like the Zionist movement? And quite honestly, that has not been that long. I'd say for me, maybe more than 5, but less than 10 years ago. And until then, I saw myself, actually, as Jen says, as a liberal Zionist or progressive Zionist. And what I mean by that is I was really like enamored and entranced with the idea of a Jewish state. Like the Jews should have their own country. And of course, that would be in the land of Israel. There's no other place where that makes any sense. And I devoted myself to it. But turning against that and deciding like, no, like, first of all, that's wrong. And I need to speak out against that concept. That has only been 5 or less than 10 years.
Was there a inflection point that changed your perspective? Jen talks about the first Intifada. Was there anything for you in particular that kind of changed your viewpoint pertaining to this issue?
It's been a slow, progressive change, but I could point to some incidents and some things that just like pushed me over the line and really like challenged me to re-examine and reevaluate, my own beliefs, my own position. So one of those things was when Israel attacked a ship called the Mavi Marmara that was sailing from Istanbul to Gaza. I don't remember exactly the year, but about 10 years ago, it was one of these attempts that I think was actually largely performative to break the siege of Gaza that had been going on for years, even then. Now, when I say performative, of course they knew that the Israeli military wouldn't let them through. They weren't actually going to arrive, but they were taking medical supplies and school supplies and things like wheelchairs, notebooks, and taking it to Gaza. And they were attacked on the open seas in international waters in the middle of the night. Israel, sent attack helicopters with commandos who boarded the ship and murdered people. And the people they murdered, I'd say, were people kind of like me, nonviolent activists who wanted to do something to help other people. And they were murdered for that. And at that moment, when I heard that, after everything else I've been hearing for decades, at that time, I thought, I can no longer like restrain myself or hold back what I know. Up until then, I had really self-censored in order to maintain what I thought was a place in the Jewish community. I would be invited to the meetings of the boards of rabbis and things like that, and if I spoke out and said really what I think and really what I know is true, that would be the end of me. And at that moment, I thought, okay, I got to do this. I can't hold back anymore. So that's one. You asked inflection points. And another one that really just flipped me was reading the book, Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, by the Israeli history professor, Ilan Pappé. And just say he was born in Israel, grew up in Israel. His parents were refugees from Hitler. He's not only a historian, but a professor of history. And he wrote a book completely based on contemporaneous sources, the minutes of the meetings of the executive of the Jewish Agency, or David Ben-Gurion's own diaries, or reports from one unit to another of different military groups, of even pre-state Jewish militias like the Haganah. And until I read that book, I believed that Jews never attacked Arabs and never took their land up until, David Ben-Gurion declared the state of Israel on May 14th, 1948. And then these Arab armies attacked on May 15th. And the Jews had to fight back. Oh, and they won. And in the course of winning, they took a lot of land that didn't belong to them. That's what I believed. I would argue with people vociferously. I was like so sure I was right. I argued that for years. And then I read that book. I'll just say it again for your listeners, anybody that is wondering about this history, this the founding of the state of Israel being built on the ethnic cleansing of 750,000 Palestinians whose children and grandchildren, for example, are in Gaza today. That's why they're there. So they were ethnically cleansed. So the book is called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, and was written by Ilan Pappé. And just in my journey, for me to read that book meant I could just no longer believe in these myths. So those are two inflection points.
I think one of the most telling images that I've personally seen, and we've seen many, we've seen the carnage, the absolute genocidal behavior, and I've seen it firsthand. The one thing as crazy as it sounds, the one thing I will give the Zionists credit for is they really don't run from their genocidal tendencies. They let it be known how they feel about Palestinians, including ones that say that Palestine doesn't even exist. I mean, know your enemy and know how they really feel and what they really believe. I would rather the wolf than the wolf in sheep's clothing, and we see that a lot.
Yeah.
But what I will say that I thought was extremely telling was this image that we saw the other day, and what they did. And this is sort of emblematic of what has transpired over the past several months. I have never in my life seen a circumstance where we have seen this endless pursuit of violence against the free press. And all that it tells me more than anything else is that when you feel that you have to hurt people that are in the press, or dare I say, eliminate people in the free press, how do you defend your position?
Well, actually, that is how they defend their position. They literally killed the messenger, literally, right? The one that made the most horrific one was Shireen Abu Akleh, who was a very, very popular, courageous Palestinian TV reporter who was shot in the neck by an Israeli sniper and killed. That was more than, I think, 2 years ago. But since then, as everybody knows, in Gaza, Israel has targeted specifically and killed well over 100 journalists, and they're still doing that, like within this last week. So this photo that you have on the screen right now, it's teenagers, right? Remember who these are kids.
Well, they're taught this from a very young age.
They absolutely are, right? So these may be like 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds. They're in Zionist, I shouldn't even say that. They're in like extreme ethno-nationalist youth organizations with like a veneer of religiosity that makes them very passionate. And they are murderous. Yeah.
Rabbi,
I want to add into this conversation,
please,
the idea of suppressing the truth, silencing people that say things that they don't want heard. So somebody in that category is Jen Perelman, right? The organized Jewish community, if I can call it that. It's not really a community anymore. It's not a community, but the large Jewish organizations, the Zionist organizations, try to silence her. They use all kinds of libel against her, and same thing with me, and same thing with my rabbinic colleagues in organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace, other very dedicated, knowledgeable, committed Jews speaking the truth are labeled as anti-Semites. I had somebody yell at me today that I hate the Jewish people. I hate the Jews, right? That's so illogical, but they make really spurious arguments to just try to discredit what we say, and silence us. But of course, it doesn't work, right?
Well, that's always been my point of contention. When I look at this and I see that when I think about my congresswoman and I look at what she's done for many years, she only gets progressively worse every single session.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
this one, she took it to a level that, in my opinion, is as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than Trump moving the embassy to Jerusalem. And that's her decision to basically be the front person to fight for this resolution on Capitol Hill that declares that Zionism and Judaism are one and the same. And by doing that, you're effectively saying that we can do whatever we want. And if you are saying something, disrespectful against the Zionist movement, well, then that's anti-Semitism, and we will use that against you. And the way that the Zionist movement has operated, I mean, certainly it's very dangerous to be in the Middle East right now, but in the States, they use economic power against the more vulnerable in order to silence them from ever saying anything.
Oh, absolutely right. Sure.
And
you want to say the name of the congresswoman you're referring to so people don't have any illusions or don't have to wonder?
I think we bring out the biggest mensch that you have on the Capitol Hill right now. And of course, he would say Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who I still believe is as responsible as anybody for pushing us into this, sort of like Back to the Future, Biff horrific type timeline where Bernie Sanders was not allowed to compete on an even playing field against Hillary Clinton in 2016. And as a result, we ended up where we ended up. I do believe Bernie Sanders on a fairly even playing field would have won the presidency in 2016. Now, would that have solved all of the economic and political crises that we have in the United States as a result of him being there? No, but I do think that we would have been trending in the right direction, especially on the issues of the environment, of foreign policy.
So many things.
People like to hurt him, say that he's not as good on foreign policy. I understand that, but especially on healthcare. And he would have had a tremendous opportunity to lead this nation in a way that we so desperately needed, and we're cheated out of as a result of that. And so I would like to ask, from your perspective, when you see somebody like Wasserman Schultz representing the Jewish community in the way that she does, can you talk about how that creates more anti-Semitic fervor against the Jewish people?
Yeah, actually, it's really sad. It shouldn't be this way. But I think the greatest cause of anti-Semitism in America and where I live in Canada at this time is Israel and Zionism, and it's their advocates that are so adamant that they insist that Israel represents the Jews, stands for the Jews. It's like interchangeable with the Jews, and that the Jewish people here where we live are basically like an extension of Israel. And if so that people in society see that, they see what Israel's doing, and they blame the Jews for it. And like you just said, they also see manipulations of our governments around other issues because of Zionist interests. And again, these organizations like AIPAC, some that kind of disguise themselves and use other names, they are eliciting negative reactions to Jews in general because they associate all of us with what they do. And again, that's why it's so important that we have organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace, which is a large anti-Zionist Jewish organization. Another one is called If Not Now, tends to be a bit younger people. They don't label themselves as anti-Zionist, but they're really trying to control the devotion of American government to Israel. They're trying to change the relationship and the position of the U.S. government regarding Israel. So that's called If Not Now. It's so important to have voices like that in the mix. They're very credible voices, and they counter these extremely well-funded groups like I'll just say again AIPAC. And one that I know Jen has had to contend with is called Democratic Majority for Israel.
DMFI.
It's
Yeah.
funded by billionaires, right? So it's very important to support groups like Jewish Voice for Peace, or if not now, I think especially for Jewish people that want to make a difference, to join those, become part of it.
Well, you know, there is this sort of, I have this theory, and of course, eventually you poke the bear enough times where eventually somebody's going to come out of the woodwork. I think, and I'm certainly a little biased here, but even you agree, Jen's first official campaign ad of what is called Zionist Atonement, where she basically talked about what it was like growing up in, you know, North Miami Beach and what that was like and how that eventually changed over time. And it didn't just happen overnight. This is this is sort of an unwinding of all these different things. And Dave Rubin, who is part of, you know, Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire and, you know, gets all of that funding from Zionist billionaires, you know, he came out and commented on Jen's video calling her a retard. And as far as I'm concerned, in a way, that's kind of a good thing, because if those guys are coming out and coming after Jen, I think that means that she's pissing off the right people, because those are the people, and the people who typically are devoted and use their Jewishness to protect the Zionist cause. They're doing it for money. And yes, it's the age-old trope about Jews and money. I get it. But at the end of the day, Dave Rubin and guys like Ben Shapiro, they're just like Wasserman Schultz. They make people more. There's always going to be that undercurrent of anti-Semitism. It exists, but it's kind of like beneath the surface. It's not. It doesn't. You don't have to poke the bear. But right now, they're not poking the bear. They are tossing gasoline all over it, and they are getting people to get these big channels. Like one of them, I think, is Stop Zionist Hate, but that is filled with anti-Semites, filled with them. They equate Zionists and Jews as one, and they say it's the Jews. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're talking like that, then clearly it's not just what's going on. You're just trying to find an excuse to use this as cannon fodder to go after Jewish people. And to me, that is that distinction that I think is very, very dangerous right now. And guys like the Rubins of the world, they thrive on it because for them, it's all about money.
Yeah, also just like provoking conflict, making a big name for themselves. But that argument that you just expressed from Stop Zionist Hate, it also could be kind of like a false flag thing to elicit support and sympathy for Jews by saying, you know, by putting out that kind of stuff that sounds so anti-Semitic that people reject it. And then their reaction is to end up being more supportive of Israel. Could be, you know, but just Dave Rubin's argument to say that Jen is a retard, like how deep and sophisticated is that argument?
Not too deep, but then again, I would never accuse Dave Rubin of being too deep anyway.
You know, what kind of thoughtful discussion is that? It's just name calling. And we, you know, that is about what they have to resort to, because really the actual arguments aren't there. I think it's impossible in this time to support the state of Israel as a Jewish state, you know, to make good, solid arguments for why there should be a Jewish state that privileges Jews and discriminates against other people to the point now of just killing thousands of them before our eyes. Like, how can you actually support that? So the only thing they can do is resort to name calling and try to discredit people like Jen, me, and hundreds of thousands of other Jews that know that that has to stop.
Why do you think that there is a code of silence in the Jewish community in a lot of places, even if they don't necessarily want to remain silent?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. One is, I think on a very deep level, people don't want to, you said it in the very, before I came on, people don't want to go against their own. You know, they want to be loyal and be seen as loyal. Do you hear a little clicking and tweeting right now?
I hear a little bit of audio trailing and rising on your end a little bit.
What's going on? I just want to, you maybe can't, This is a man in Gaza who's calling me.
Oh, wow.
And I just digress a little bit. I can't silence it because of the way the thing is set up here.
No, it's fine.
No, but I've been fundraising and sending money to individual families in Gaza.
Yeah.
Actually, for about 5 years. I've been doing that for 3 or 4 families for years because it's always been a struggle for them. They lived under a siege. They didn't have what they need. They couldn't feed their children. And the last 8 months have been insane. You know,
Well, the lack of humanity is very, very disturbing. But in a way, it's kind of like, when people talk about we want to go back to the 1950s, it's like, well, listen, if there's one thing that I can say, even though I don't want the circumstances of people's lives to have to go back to the 1950s, what I will say is that the notion of knowing who your enemies really are or how people really think about things, this is the ultimate watershed moment. You are either on the side of genocide or you're not. This is pretty clear. And every box is checked. And you have got people in the Zionist movement saying, yeah, we've killed a lot of people, but not nearly as many as you're saying that we have. I mean, like, if that's your argument at this point, what the hell do you have? Right. You don't have anything. But you have money and you have power. And you have political power. And you think it's going to last forever. But the truth is, in this type of circumstance, I think once you're awake, no one's going back to sleep on this. This is no pun intended, generational change that is coming. It's going to happen.
I hope. This might sound like a cliche, but I'm old enough to remember in my life the Vietnam War. That was a very formative experience. And to know about carpet bombing Cambodia, and to know about defoliating Vietnam, and seeing pictures of like naked little girl running down the street because her village was napalmed. You know what I'm saying? So at that time, and I'm actually arguing against you. At that time, so many people were so conscious. There were millions of people. We had hundreds of thousands of people in the streets. So many people knew what was going on and resisted it. And it wasn't enough to make the changes that we need, right? So I'm just making an argument that what we see today and the kind of rising consciousness, and you're saying people are very clear. They're either with the genocide or they're against it, right? You're right about that. But I don't have any confidence that that is going to make the changes that we need. And I'm just going to go back to Jen again. That's why it's so important to be politically mobilized and to engage. There's nothing inevitable about social justice or about truth winning. We have to mobilize ourselves and make it happen. And I think she's like a shining example of a person who's put herself out there to do that. And we can each do that in our own ways. But I don't think, because every day we're seeing pictures of a genocide in real time, and so many people are waking up to that. And like you said, they're never going to go back to sleep again. That in and of itself is not enough. We need to be engaged on many different levels in many different ways.
I definitely agree with that. And the mobilization factor is definitely a big thing. I actually am somewhat skeptical in a way that AIPAC and DMFI, just the Israel lobby in general, is even going to get involved in this race. And I believe that for 2 reasons. Number one, I think Jen is a very strong candidate, and I don't think they want to give any additional coverage to her. I think if people see her and hear her message and see her leadership capability, that they will be more inclined to recognize that putting an even brighter light on this race is not going to be good. And I also think Wasserman Schultz is certainly very powerful within the Israel lobby, circles, if you will, in the sense that if she doesn't want attention drawn to this race, then she will basically tell them, I don't want you getting involved, because statistically speaking, people are not as aware of this. And when you have a late August primary in the dead heat of summer in South Florida, not a lot of people want to get out to the polls to begin with anyway. So in her mind, it's like, well, let me just get my people out there and I'll still win. If more people know that this race is going on, they're going to be curious about Jen And likely they're going to probably be inclined to want to support her, because I'd like to believe in my heart of hearts, Wasserman Schultz knows that she's damaged goods. She just, her ego and her narcissistic personality, which in my opinion is actually sociopathic in a lot of ways. I don't think she cares. I think that she, as said many times before, I know better than the people do. She really, she has said that many times, said, I know what's best. That to me, I think is going to be a very interesting play here, because we've obviously seen what's happening with Jamal Bowman and George Latimer in New York. They are putting in an ungodly amount of money into that race. Latimer has already, shocking, broken several campaign finance laws, and he'll break many more before the race is over in a few weeks. But I do think if Bowman hangs on, I think that's going to be a shot across the bow for AIPAC. They'll keep coming, but I do think that will
others.
But people,
there have been others. You know how much money they put in to defeat Summer Lee?
They did, and then they backed off.
And they failed, and Cori Bush, and they failed. And we've had some really great examples. Of challengers in the Democratic Party, progressive challengers overcoming very entrenched power. Cori Bush is a great example, right? I mean, she was just like a leader in the streets in St. Louis, and she unseated literally a second generation, like dynasty. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez a few years ago overcame the third ranking Democrat in the House, right? So I don't, what you're saying is very possible, and it just takes the work. People have to do the work. Like I said, nothing is inevitable. Like nobody should ever think like, oh, she can win, so I will just sit back and do nothing. That's not going to work. I
also think that the one thing that I've always tried. I mean, listen, I don't think I have issues with Alex. I think she's very performative, and clearly she wants to get on the next rung of the political ladder. That's obvious. But I also think people need to understand that as much as they're not doing enough, when you consider what we had in place before 6 or 7 of them got there, just 6 or 7 alone does change the narrative. Imagine if 60 or 70 of them were there. And there was a time where we've had presidents in the past. Obviously, it's been a very long time. I think the country obviously changed for the worse when Jack was assassinated. But when you go back and you look at the level of control that FDR had over his congressional delegation, even in the Dixie South, especially those first 2 years when he was able to get Social Security through, it really says a lot about having the political will to make that change. And as conservative as a lot of the Congress ended up getting, no one's touching Social Security as much as they say that they will. Even the person who thinks he's getting back in there in a few months, and he just might, we're totally protecting Social Security and Medicare. It's like, because we know what policies people really want. They want social democratic policies because the working class desperately needs help. But I am going to play a quick clip, and this is just to show people that I do not support President Biden, but just know, even if it's hot air rhetoric, this is what President Trump is planning to do should he get back into the White House.
Number one, they have to finish the job. Israel has to finish that job. They have to finish it quickly, strongly, and they have to get back to life again because it's taking too long. They have to finish the job.
You're saying go in, win, and finish.
You got to win. Got to win.
What does that mean? What does it mean you got to win? Is that we're totally got to blow them to pieces? It's like, what does this mean? It's, again, I shun at this idea that we're ever going to get to a point. I mean, again, even in Canada, I'm sure there are certain benefits to the electoral system. There's some bad things, but at the end of the day, in this country, we're so corporate captured, and we only have these 2 monolith parties that get, they're controlled by the billionaire class. And granted, there are more billionaires that are in the Democratic Party than there are in the Republican Party, but there's a lot more Zionists that are in the GOP than they are in the Democratic Party. And a lot of them are Christian Zionists, which is something that a lot of people don't want to talk about. Like the Joel Osteens of the world and the Pat Robertsons of the world. Those are all Christian Zionists. They all revere the state of Israel and believe that they can do whatever they want. And when I hear Trump talking like this, I'm thinking, is it possible that he'll change his tune when he gets in there? Yeah, it's possible, but it's also possible that he completely means what he's saying. And he's also talking to his good friend Sean Hannity, who's a Christian Zionist.
I think, yeah. I don't know if Trump gives a lot of thought to what he says, but that idea of finish it, win, and get it over with makes me think about the U.S. in Vietnam, right? And the people that the U.S. was fighting against were the people. They were of the people, right? The Viet Cong were the people. And you really can't defeat the people because they're the ones who live there and they're staying, and I think Israel's in a similar situation around this idea of defeating or, ending this militarily. It's impossible.
Yeah. This is talk about being caught between a rock and a hard place. And I did believe that RFK had a real shot to make an impact, and he may still, but as Jen likes to say, he's too far up Rabbi Shmuley's tuchus to be able to see. So that's unfortunately a problem. We'll continue.
Yeah.
The attack on October 7th, and it's getting more and more demeaned. They're demeaning it. I have people now telling me they don't think the attack ever happened. And take a look. You watch the news reports.
I have the
where
50
people
minutes
that are
of video.
protesting. Sure, I know you do, and so do I. But here's the thing. You watch these people on television, and then just like you have Holocaust deniers also. They say the Holocaust never took. It's the exact same people. They're saying it never happened. AOC +3. Israel was the most powerful lobby in the country 15 years ago.
They're still the most powerful lobby in the country. And for him to even say that is another one of those Trumpisms where it's like, no, you're not supposed to say that. That's you can't have that.
And no one says that October 7th didn't happen. Just absolutely no one says that. So this is it's just manipulative demagoguery.
Listen, I've got the best people around me. They totally came out. They told me, they said they got people saying October 7th didn't happen. It's really terrible. We got to go in there. We got to finish the job. That's what we got to do. It's freaking performance art with this guy, but he's in a position right now where, because of the current president, he's tracking to get back in there again. And considering everything that's going on right now, there's not even an attempt to cool things down. It's just get worse and worse and worse. So we'll get to Netanyahu after the video's over.
Today, between Tlaib and AOC and all of these people, what they're doing, Israel, they don't have the backing that they once had.
You'll give it to them.
Yeah, I'm good. But they don't have the backing. Even Schumer has become like a Palestinian. Chuck Schumer, Jewish, always strong for Israel. He's become like a Palestinian.
Called for elections in the middle of a war.
Yeah, it's a very bad thing. It's a very sad thing, and it's a very dangerous thing. But if you look, so many people, I watch on your show where they're going and interviewing these people that are protesting just recently at Columbia and the different places. They say, we don't believe October 7th ever happened. And they may believe that, they may actually believe that, but they have to get the job done. They have to get in there and they have to get it done.
And when he calls out Rashida Tlaib by name, which of course is not a mistake, you put people's lives in danger, because there are these crazy radicals that, especially because of the economic and political circumstances of our time, people are desperate and they'll look for anything that they can, latch onto, where they think that maybe if I do this, things will get better,
Sure.
even if it means sacrificing myself. That the whole concept of what's going on, to me, is exceptionally dangerous. And none of these guys, listen, credit to Jill Stein, even though, she's running on the Green Party ticket and there's many issues there. I think that she's going to do well. She'll certainly do as well as she's ever done before, because this is not going away. But she's a Jewish woman who's also a baby boomer, and she is saying what needs to be said. This is a genocide and we've got to stop it. Now, you could argue that, well, it's easier to do that when you don't have hundreds of millions of dollars backing your campaign and making you a real threat to win the presidency. I do think her threat to get to 5% is very possible. Somebody's got to step up. And I think that Trump is saying what he's saying clearly because he thinks it's what's going to help him electorally. But that's an example of his rhetoric that is just so off the wall. And being with Sean Hannity, who I think is a friend of his, that doesn't help either. Sean Hannity is one of the absolute worst corporate talking heads I've ever seen in the history of cable TV. As bad as anybody.
All right. So what do we do about it? That's the question that matters. What can we do?
Well, what we can do, obviously, is to help people like Jen, also help those that are fighting the good fight. I do think somebody like Jill Stein is worth supporting, just because it's there. It's something. It's something where you could potentially make an electoral impact. But the truth of the matter is, if you were going to make that change in the United States, it's going to come from a labor movement. That's why you've got, I mean, the best labor leader we have today is Sean Fain of the UAW, the United Auto Workers. And he's out there saying, we need to end this now. There is a genocide that is occurring. And that takes a lot. But is it surprising that it's coming from the labor movement? No, because this is a class war. And one thing that I think you've probably noticed over the course of this whole odyssey since October 7th is that it really is a class war. The affluent Jewish class are the ones who are standing firmly with Israel. And it's basically everybody else in the Jewish community who is saying, we don't want any part of this. This is not who we are. This does not represent Judaism, and this is absolutely wrong. And it really does fall on class lines. Your thoughts on that as we wind down the conversation?
Yep. I think you're exactly right. And again, I think people need to mobilize and really apply ourselves to pragmatically making the changes that we can. And I just comment a little bit about Jill Stein and the presidential race and congressional races as well. I think we need to be very strategic and pragmatic. Look at the states we vote in and the districts we vote in. And if we're in swing districts or swing states where taking support away from someone who could win, but they're not ideal, and voting for someone who's more ideal, and thereby making the one who's not ideal lose and get something even worse, that's a bad strategy. We shouldn't let the somewhat good be the enemy of the perfect, right? That's what I'm. So my decision around somebody like Jill Stein is I'll just say I vote in Pennsylvania, which is a very large swing state with a lot of electoral votes, right? And I don't want to see Trump win, right? So as much as I'd like to vote for Jill Stein, I'll probably vote for Joe Biden because I live in Pennsylvania. If I lived someplace where it's not a swing state, and my vote is unlikely to determine the outcome anyway, I would feel very free to vote for her and express myself. There's no chance she's going to win. That's not what's going to happen, right? But if I lived in a state where I knew it was going to come out either Democrat or Republican, my vote's not going to matter. It'll be great. Okay, I'll just vote for Jill Stein. And I would take the same approach to congressional elections, Senate elections. Try to think very pragmatically, realistically, in the one place where my one vote matters, what's going to produce the best outcome, and not just like try to express myself, but look at what's really going to be the impact of what I do.
Which also speaks to the bigger issue here for so many of us. We do have these issues that, regarding voting, that becomes a much bigger problem because we're not as active as we should be. If you really believe in a cause, you have to get involved. That's why I always encourage people to sign up to volunteer for Jen. If you're not down in South Florida, get on the phones and phone bank, text bank. There are ways to help. Donating obviously matters, but at the end of the day, not everybody can. But there's always ways to contribute. And for me, I'm on the ground. I love to door knock. It's just a thing for me. I've always been in sales. It's in my DNA. It's not for everybody, but I would definitely say that it all starts at the ground level in your local community, and that's where a lot of that change happens. The truth is that our presidential vote is very minute. It obviously grows leaps and bounds depending on how many people we're talking about, but that local election can make all the difference in the world. And the election that we're focusing on here. I think if Jen were to unseat Wasserman Schultz, I think that would be a big shot across the bow that we could use right now.
Oh, it would be amazing. It would be absolutely amazing. You just said what you love to do. You love door knocking because you're a salesman. So there's some people. I just want to say everybody has a way they can contribute. People have a lot of money, give money. If you're not a door knocker, maybe you can do data processing. Maybe you can edit materials. Maybe you can organize little groups to meet in people's houses, you know. And another thing is that most of us live in places where the vote is not contested. I read recently that more than 95% of incumbents get reelected, right?
Oh, yes.
The place where I vote in Pennsylvania, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever for me to be involved in my congressional election. Sometimes in my district, the Democrats don't even bother to put up a candidate because the Republicans just own the place. So I'm not going to invest my time and energy there. But I have, for example, gotten very involved, like with Summer Lee, or even with Jamal Bowman, or with others. You know, these days we don't need to door knock. We can metaphorically door knock with our telephones and with texting and with so many other ways to contribute. So my main idea there is just everybody should find the way they can contribute and think really strategically, where is that going to matter? And if your own district it doesn't need you, go elsewhere. Maybe you can help Jen from wherever you are, or pick someone else and do what you can to tip the balance, you know.
Rabbi, needless to say, this has been a fantastic conversation. I thank you for what you do. I think it is very important that especially people in your position are willing to speak out in a way that a lot of others are not. There is a rabbi who is in this district in probably one of the bigger synagogues who is a full-blown Zionist, to say the least, and it's very sad to see, because I know that rhetoric is going to play a role in going after Jen, which they will do.
Yeah.
But the good news is that Jen has been embraced by a lot of different communities, including the Muslim community, in a very, very big way. They are so unbelievably appreciative that she is willing to speak up in a way that so few others are willing to do. When I've met so many people who have lost friends and family. This is very real. And I think a lot of times people just don't want to know what's going on. Well, you know what? This is not going away. We're going to keep speaking truth to power. We're going to fight that good fight. And I hope I'll be seeing you down the road as the election season heats up, and certainly appreciate your support for Jen.
Thank you so much. Yep. You're doing great work.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Have a good night, and thank you.
Bye-bye. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I certainly enjoyed it very much. I think there's a lot of wisdom. You know, the thing about religious scholars is that they really, the ones that are in it for the right reasons. You know, I can't say enough about the importance of the way that religion is used as a force for good versus a weapon. And we see that what is done by the likes of the Rabbi Shmulis of the world, what we see with the likes of the pastor, if you even call them that, Joel Osteen's of the world and Pat Robertson's of the world. You know, and then there's there's been members obviously of the Muslim faith as well that has done bad. You know, Farrakhan comes to mind. You know, they're all out there, but there's also a lot of good people that are trying to do the right thing, and I think that that's very important to know. And again, I don't agree with you, Andrew. I don't agree with you at all, because there is a very big libertarian anti-war movement that is growing in the GOP. Now, if you want to say that the majority of the conservative movement that is still there, like the George Bush era GOPers, like the Nikki Haley's of the world, you're right, they can't be reasoned with because they're bought off by corporate special interests. That is a big part of it. Don't forget that. So what I would say is, again, these conversations are very important because we're trying to band as many people together as we can, even the ones that we might not necessarily agree with, because that issue is a very big deal. Now, Colin, I don't know if there's a good clip for Briahna that you could pull up real quick. The other thing that we briefly touched on with the rabbi, regarding Israel funding the covert influence campaign. A lot of that does stem from the fact that they are killing journalists. and then you invest a significant amount of money in insisting that, it's really the Israelis that are being persecuted, not the Palestinians. For Trump to say what he's saying is just, again, this is why I don't support either one. That to me, I have a big problem with that. But for those of you who have been paying attention, Briahna Joy Gray was fired from the Hill earlier this evening. I know that there have been some contentious conversations that have happened earlier, including a number of Zionists that have come on and have tried to, goad her into trying to react in a negative way. As you can see here, Briahna put out this tweet a little earlier this evening. It finally happened. The Hill has fired me. There should be no doubt that that Rising has a clear pattern of suppressing speech, particularly when it's critical of the state of Israel. This is why they fired Katie Halper. It was only a matter of time before they fired me. They also fired Kim Iverson. Don't forget that. Obviously, she's going to use her, she's savvy. I give her credit. You can continue to follow me on my patreon.com/Bad Faith podcast. No, Crystal and Saga were not fired. They ultimately decided to start their own media company, which is fine. I think they've done a pretty good job. Very good job, actually, for being honest. The thing about Brie is that, and this is why not a lot of people are going to garner too much sympathy in her direction, is that she is very career-minded, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, she definitely has opportunistic tendencies from time to time. But I think she is right on a number of key issues. Anytime you're willing to put yourself out there on these very important points, I do think that you have to be willing to take that stand. Did Brie know that she was going to be fired? That's possible. It's possible that she felt that this was an inevitable circumstance that she was not going to run away from. And, to that end, I do give her credit for that. That does take courage. It really does. It takes courage to speak truth to power. And she has a history of doing that. She has a history of also saying things that I don't agree with. But I also believe that we're getting to the point now where the suppressive tactics are going to take on a whole new level of intensity. I think Brie is just the beginning. But you're going to see the exposure of this broken system is going to become more and more profound as we go forward. This is not going to get better. The IDF has already made it clear that what's going on in Gaza will continue until at least the end of the year. Think about how many more dead bodies are going to pile up as a result. There has been a suggestion that there may be dead as many as 100,000 Palestinians have now been killed. And what ultimately is to come of this, which I think is something that we cannot ignore. And I think in a lot of ways, people just kind of either want to ignore that reality or they are acknowledging it and they're just simply okay with it. If you don't like Briahna Joy Gray, that's fine. But like many a times before has been stated, when you think about the importance of free speech and what that represents, the idea is to protect the speech for those that you don't agree with, not the ones that you do. We're living in a time right now where people have a tendency to want to protect the speech of those that they agree with, and they're okay with the suppression of those that they don't. I, for one, believe in the ability for people to have these conversations where they don't necessarily agree. I know there are people in the chat who do not agree with the rabbi saying that he supports Joe Biden if he were voting in the state of Pennsylvania. And if I disagree with him, who gives a shit? That's his prerogative. I'm not going to hound somebody if they choose to exercise their vote, just like I have very close friends and family that are going to vote for Trump. That's how it is. I know people that are going to vote for RFK. I know tons of people that are going to vote for Jill Stein. That's what free and fair elections are about. Now, if somebody tells me they're voting for Debbie Wasserman Schultz, that I have a big problem with. But I still support their right to express themselves, because that's freedom of choice. I agree with you guys. I do think that the Hill is going to suffer for this decision. I think that Brie did bring a lot of viewership to the channel. I think Rabbi Save is terrible. I think he is the embodiment of white privilege in a lot of ways, and you know me, I ain't into that shit. But he is, I'm telling you, he looks like he should just show up to work every day with a V-neck sweater tied around his neck. Like he's ready for the country club. That's how he comes off, completely. And of course he's a libertarian, economic libertarian across the board. Why? Because he's from privilege. It's easy to be that way when you already have it made. I think that the channel is going to suffer. I do. I think Brie will be fine. I do think that he is, or she, excuse me. I think that Brie is going to land on her feet. I think that she will absolutely be all right. The Bad Faith podcast, or, whatever channel ultimately ends up coming as a result of it. It was probably a good gig. It probably paid well. But you have to ask yourself, was Brie warned? And then she said, fuck it. I'll take my chances. I think it's probably the latter. I think she did say, I'll take my chances. And she just went for it. And eventually they said, all right, that's enough. And David, you're probably right. So, Colin, like I said, I don't know if there's any clips that you can drop, regarding Jill Stein's conversation with Jordan the other day, or anything that Brie had recently said pertaining to. I know that she gave an interview the other day where there was a Zionist who came on and basically tried to goad her, especially on the conversation of rape, which I thought was completely effed up, to say the least. And Brie wasn't having anything of it. And I believe that that was the last time that she was on. I'm not familiar with this particular interview. It'll be interesting. Sable, Jessica Burbank absolutely will be elevated. She's a pretty girl. She's very good at her job. She's done some really good work with More Perfect Union, especially on High Speed Rail. If you guys haven't seen that video, highly recommend checking it out. Again, it's the quality of the work that really matters. But Jessica's going to probably get that same talking to. If you cross the line on this particular issue, we're coming for you, and that's it. She'll have to make that decision for herself in her career, and she's pretty young. I don't know how much younger than Brie she is, but that's a decision that is going to have to be made. So we're going to play a quick clip. This is where things went off the rail with Brie, and I do believe this may have been the last segment that she filmed the other day.
Thank you. Me too. And I really hope that you specifically will believe women when they say that they got hurt.
All right. Thanks for joining. Stick around. More Rising coming.
I do believe that this is the last clip that Brie did. And of course, the person that is talking here is a Zionist. And again, here's the thing. Do I think it's possible that there are these extenuating circumstances where this Zionist truth, if you will, is actually true? That there are Hamas individuals, terrorists, whatever, that have committed sexual violence against women? Sure, it's very possible. Do you just want to pretend that a genocide isn't going on and that your people are perpetrating it? And you fucking know that they are? But this is what supremacy looks like in real time. Our people are worth more than yours. We'll kill them all if we have to. And if you don't believe me, go and look at some of the threads on Jen's Facebook page and see what the Zionists really think of Palestinians and what they really think of people who don't agree with them. They're bloodthirsty as anybody. They think it is perfectly acceptable to kill them all, as they like to say. Mow the lawn. That is a big part of it. I don't think we're going to get into a segment tonight regarding Russia declaring U.S. an enemy, but just remember, and maybe we'll address it next Monday. Russia declared the United States an enemy of their country for the first time. And why did they do that? Because there has been incessant bombing going on in Russia. Yeah, you didn't know about that one. And it's from weapons that we gave to Ukraine, and they're doing it. Okay. Well, I did say it would turn into a proxy war, and you were insistent that it couldn't happen. Well, guess what? Now it did. We are all over the fucking map. All over the map. And it's only getting worse. Chris, great to see you. And thank you for smashing that like button. Thank you for all smashing the like button. It really does make a difference. And it's certainly appreciated. You're probably right, global solidarity. That is going to play a part for sure. See, the thing about what Bree was doing there, David, you have to remember, is that she basically was saying, whether or not you're telling the truth, what you're basically trying to do is whitewash the reality of what your people are doing to the Palestinians. That's why she's doing it. The reason that the sexual violence, isolated incidents are being discussed ad nauseum by the Zionist movement is because they're trying to shield the criticism away from the genocide that they're committing. That's all it is. Just like the bring the hostages home. The hostages are not coming home. They're cannon fodder for endless war to commit a genocide and create an ethno-state in Israel. That's the whole point. And that's not to disrespect anybody who may have family or friends that may be a hostage. You have to stop pretending that you can't see the forest for the trees. Because a lot of people don't want to see it. They don't want to know. That's a big part. That's a big part of it. And so I absolutely despise how we do foreign policy, but remember, our foreign policy is predicated on always feeding the war machine. And just remember, despite what our other Canadian friend has to say in the chat and others have said regarding their support for Ukraine, just remember, the retaliation that Russia's going to throw at Ukraine now, and a couple 100,000 more dead Ukrainians as a result. I feel so bad for the Ukrainian people, just as I feel for the Palestinian people, because they don't want this. But you know who does? Weapons manufacturers and contractors. That's who wants it. It never ends. We don't have a say. This is a big part of the problem. The sooner we recognize that all war is bullshit, whether our people are fighting in it or not, it's a big problem. I blame everybody. Russia has responsibility, and so do we. That's how it works. Chris Garrett gets it. I hope more people will get it too. We're in a very, very dangerous time. And that's why I'm out there every time that there is a canvassing opportunity to help Jen. I'm not going to sit on the sideline. That's why we love you, my friend. Appreciate you. Andrew, you could get as pissed off at me as you can ever be, and we're not going to see eye to eye on this. This is all NATO. They brought this on themselves. Russia said their red line. There is no such thing as Ukraine being able to get into NATO. It is a World War III red line. You don't like it? Tough shit. That's just how it is, man. We can't always get what we want. We can't. And Jill Stein gave a fantastic interview yesterday on Status Coup. Here's somebody who, give her credit, says what needs to be said.
It doesn't get any more draconian than this. And Joe Biden isn't certain that it's a war crime. And in spite of his uncertainty, he continues. You know, on one hand, he says he's going to pause a certain group of weapons, the most intensive bunker buster bombs. And then a couple days later, he's appropriating another $1 billion of weapons to continue the same assault. The man has really lost his marbles, you know, if he hadn't already. And he's essentially passed over the baton of commander-in-chief to Bibi Netanyahu, who is allowed to undertake the most aggressive acts of war, actually, against Iran by bombing the embassy of Iran in Syria. That is an act of war, and Biden basically says nothing, allowing Netanyahu to do whatever he wants to drag us into an explosive war situation, particularly with Iran.
Imagine that. You know, imagine the danger that we're looking at there. You know, we've got everything going on at once. And this is the danger of having a president who is not cognitively there. Again, I don't have to agree with the rabbi. I'm just going to state my position. You have a president right now. If we, again, you can make statements like this and you only sound like a fool. And the reason you sound like a fool is simply this. Hamas is supported by Iran because Israel is occupying the Palestinian people, hence the opening in order to create these terrorist opportunities for it to just perpetuate and continue and continue and continue. That's the point. If the Palestinian people were not occupied, there wouldn't be a Hamas. It wouldn't be able to continue. But that's not the situation we're in. And no one is saying that Iran is innocent. But the one thing that we are constantly fooling ourselves with is this idea that we can't see the forest for the trees when it comes to our foreign policy. And that everything is predicated on money and power, and even more so when it comes to foreign policy because of our desire to control all of the resources on the planet. This is how things end up in Ukraine and Russia. This is how things end up in the Middle East. This is how things are going to end up in the South China Sea. And this is how things are going to end up in Iran if we keep kicking the hornet's nest. And thankfully, Jill Stein is talking about it. That's a big part of it. One action creates another action. And she is mentioning this at a time where so few others are willing to say it. That is, again, one of those situations where what I do think is going to be different this time around for Jill Stein compared to 2016 and 2012. I think this time she doesn't give a fuck. And I think that that's a very powerful position to be in, because there was this constant attack. You cost Hillary the election. And now the attitude is, yeah, and I'll do it again. So get out of my way. That's powerful. The art of not giving a fuck. That's a big thing.
Netanyahu has been begging for years.
The thing that's going to be very interesting is how, if this is really going to happen, which is just incredible, Netanyahu has been charged as a war criminal by the International Criminal Court. And the U.S. Congress, including my congresswoman, who was one of the 42 Democrats who joined the GOP, to say that she condemned the International Criminal Court for charging Netanyahu as a war criminal. So you better believe that she will be there with bells on when Netanyahu comes to the congressional chambers, and you know he's going to do it. They want people to care about Donald Trump being convicted of falsifying business records, and they're going to rip out the red carpet for this legitimate war criminal, perhaps the most dangerous foreign leader in the world, who I do believe is the most likely person to drop a nuke if push came to shove. And they're going to do it. Our Congress is going to roll out that red carpet for Netanyahu, and credit to Jill Stein for being the one person running on a national platform saying, yeah, this is unacceptable. That's a big deal. Obviously, we know where Jen stands. She is as vocal an opponent of Netanyahu as you could possibly be. And that's tantamount to her credit in the fight that she's fighting. Win or lose, it's a gutsy decision to just say, I'm going to say what needs to be said. And while there are other issues that abound and we are focused on here locally, we would be amiss not to recognize just how precarious this situation has gotten. It's gotten very bad. And everything is interconnected in one way or the other. That's what you got to remember. So you guys know, I am planning out some shows coming up. Monday night, we are going to have a returning guest, somebody that we think very highly of, and frankly should be in the U.S. Congress fighting on the side of the Palestinians right now. But unfortunately, she's not. Yuli New is going to join us, and we are, of course, going to talk about the fact that we have this very big primary election coming up in New York between Jamal Bowman and George Latimer, and the recent revelation that Mondaire Jones has come out and endorsed Mr. George Latimer. Ain't that something? Using that identity politics, it is a weapon. That's why I don't play that stupid game. Judge on the not on the color of one's skin, but on the content of one's character. And the character of Mondaire Jones is dog shit. So, with that said, we're also going to potentially have Omar Badar back on. Miko Peled is likely coming back as well. Yeah, we got a number of things lined up. I think you guys are really going to like it. And so, with that said, make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure that you hit the like button. Make sure that you share. Make sure that you comment once the live stream is over. And consider making a contribution to you know who. Consider signing up as a volunteer. We need phone banking. We need text banking. We need canvassing. We need help. Nothing's guaranteed. I think our girls got a shot, but we all know that it's going to be a monumental effort in order to get it done. Appreciate you, Henry. And I appreciate all of you guys Big Dumb Animal, Self-Care Maven, Travers, Sable, Jimmy Zimzam, Chris Garrett. You don't like my music. Travers. I did say Travers, didn't I? I think I did. I'll say Travers again because he's a ball buster from my homeland. And we always appreciate you being here. So smart, so stupid, but you're not stupid. I refuse to accept that moniker, but I'll use it because that was what you call. Ray J, great to hear you. And good reference there. I dig it. Global Solidarity, happy to have you. Tony D. David Hunter, NYC. Yes, but no. Cab. Cabernet. Caballero. Or just cab. Scab, you know. All those wonderful things. Who else we got? Who else am I forgetting? Let's see. Alexei Lindes. And yes, I would agree. Trump looks like he's sweating like a pig. Nelson Ortega. Great to have you as always. I could not agree with you more. Guzzy Guy. Thank you for stopping by. Nitram Case. Thank you so much for checking in. Really appreciate you. And finally, Netra Amorosi. It's not like the U.S. has been a friend the entire time, so what else is new? You're right. What else is new? Certainly not a light. Appreciate you all. Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those wonderful things that we ask you to do. The election, if you are so inclined to know more information about, is over at gen2024.org. So sign up and volunteer at gen2024.org. That's going to be the key. Appreciate you all. Hope you have a wonderful evening. See you Monday.